Hello, students. Hope you guys are enjoying your Friday. As you know, of course, today is an asynchronous lesson that you can watch this video at any time during the day on Friday. So the gist of what today's video is going to be about is to introduce the Monday assignment. And the reason I'm taking the time to introduce the Monday assignment, there's no assignment that's specifically due on Friday, but there is a Monday assignment. And Monday's assignment is a little bit longer than normal and has kind of an interesting twist to it. So I wanted to just explain it ahead of time and give you a brief summary of the key contents of that lesson. Since it is a little bit longer, I wanted to help you out on this end just to explain it to you. So it looks just like a cram. So Monday's assignment is to complete cram number 5. And just like every other cram, there is this cram homepage document with a link to the vocab words up at the top. So there are, I believe, 6 Quizlet vocabulary words that you need to study. And I want you to study those words before you even get in to the rest of the lesson, because knowing those vocabulary words really helps bring out the lesson. So far, so good. It looks like any normal cram, and there are 5 sections. And I want you to click on the textbook in each section. Usually it's just 1 or 2 pages of reading, and then you get down to the bottom and there are 5 sections. So far so good, looks normal. And then on the cram handout document, called The Glorious Revolution, there are also 5 questions which you need to answer in detail. So this looks normal. However, the one thing that's a little bit different about this cram and what makes it a 15-point assignment is that you do not need to watch the video at the beginning of the lesson. Normally there's a video link here. It's just a few minute video and it introduces the lesson. But in this case, you're going to watch the video after you finish answering the questions. So like normal, do the reading, answer the questions, and then down at the bottom, at the very end, you'll see the directions for the video assignment. So the video is not just a link that you click. Okay, you actually have to go to a website and watch the video on the website. So the website is entitled, it's called join.nearpod.com. You could even just copy and paste that and insert it into your web browser, and it will pull up a video that looks like this, The Glorious Revolution. But instead of you just watching the video is going to pause periodically and ask you some questions, and they are video embedded questions. And they're either going to be multiple choice or maybe fill in the blank. You're going to answer those questions. So when you log on to this page, join.nearpod.com, it'll ask you to enter a code. You're going to enter that code. Make sure that you use your real name that's on my course roster, because as the video is playing, it'll pause, you'll answer the questions. I'll print out those questions over the weekend. Actually, it's a Monday assignment. So on Tuesday, I'll print out the questions, and everybody that has commented on all of them will get credit for it. So you need to use your name when you enter this site and enter that code. That way I know who's answering the questions. So the regular cram, just answering the handout questions, is worth 5 points. And then watching this Nearpod video is worth 5 additional points. Actually, 10 points for the cram and 5 points for the video. So it's a little bit longer assignment. So because of that, I want to introduce the topic of what is the Glorious Revolution. What is that? That way you'll have a little bit better understanding on Monday when you start this cram. So what this cram is, this cram starts out with an introduction. And by the way, the Glorious Revolution was a very significant event that took place in England in the 1500s. So this cram starts out with just an introduction of how England came about as a nation state, how they were formed, who migrated into England and attacked England, and how did they establish themselves? How did Parliament get established? How did the monarchy get established? What conflicts were there between Parliament and monarchy? And a couple of the vocab terms you have are the Magna Carta and the English Bill of Rights, which were two documents that limited the power of the king and gave more rights to the citizens. So it's really important that you learn about the context of England being established as a nation state, their government, the fact that they had kings that followed the divine right theory, that they were put in power by God and everybody had to do whatever they were told, so they had those kind of kings. And as you go through the reading, it'll build up to this moment, this event called the Glorious Revolution. And so it's really important. It'll pull you into the story with, of course, the title of the lesson, The Glorious Revolution, being the final section that you're going to read about. And then, of course, you're going to watch the video to help solidify everything. All right, so let me review. Here I have put together a PowerPoint presentation, actually just a Google presentation. And I want to go through and just review the main ideas of this lesson so that when you're actually reading the cram, it just makes a little bit more sense. So I thought since it was a little bit longer assignment and we're not having a live lesson today, I would go through and just explain what this lesson is going to be about. So the goal is that you can analyze the Glorious Revolution and its impact on European history, specifically in England. Now, obviously, 4/5 of the cram is the context. And then number 5, the 5th section, is actually describing the Glorious Revolution. But if you're going to analyze the impact, then you need to know about the context and not just the event. Okay, so how did we get to the Glorious Revolution in England? Well, the last lesson was on the fall of Rome. So we learned about how Rome collapsed and the various ways that Rome collapsed in about the 5th century CE/AD. CE means Common Era. AD means Anno Domini, or some Latin word that I probably just butchered, but you can use either AD or CE in this class. Rome fell, and it left Europe without any leadership. One of the most significant empires on the planet collapsed, and all the roads that they had developed kind of collapsed and were just overrun by barbarians. So Europe was a very dangerous place to live. There was very little education. There was very little travel. And that period of time in Europe is called the Dark Ages. And it's just called the Dark Ages because there just wasn't a lot of learning and innovations and travel going on, because Rome had collapsed and the rest of Europe was just trying to rebuild. Now, the Dark Ages as a phrase is unfair to the rest of the world, because in the Muslim world and in China, they were thriving at this time. So the Dark Ages only just applies to Western Europe after the fall of Rome. So as European countries kind of pick themselves up after the fall of Rome, they install a system of government and economy called the feudal system. So maybe you studied feudalism in middle school history, and feudalism is a type of economic system where you live on a farm usually, and there's peasants that work the farm, and there's lords who live in the castle and oversee everything, and there's knights who offer protection. It's like this self-sustained community. So for several hundred years, this feudal system replaced what the Roman Empire left behind. Now, as we saw on, I guess you watch the Crusade videos before this video. So you just learned today about the series of religious wars between Christian kings in Europe and Muslims down in the Holy Land. The Holy Land is like modern day Israel and Jordan and Syria and that area. So you just learned about the Crusades and took notes. Make sure that you upload the Crusade notes along with this PowerPoint notes. As long as the PowerPoint notes, just upload those to Schoology. So we went from the fall of Rome to the feudalism to the Crusades, and now this cram is going to pick up in about 11 or 1200 CE/AD. So from the fall of Rome to this glorious revolution lesson is several hundred years of the Dark Ages, which we really aren't going to take the time to analyze. So now the last you left off, you had the fall of Rome, then you watched the Crusades videos, and now the introduction to England as a nation state in approximately 10, 11, 1200 AD. So the first question was, and again, I'm just going to give a brief overview, which will help you understand and answer the questions on your cram when you do that on Monday. So why did the feudal system break up? Well, gradually, the growth of towns led to people spreading out more and a central government taking control. So in places like England and France, instead of having all these little feudal farms all over the place, one monarch would unite a whole country and unite them into usually one language, one religion, and they called themselves a nation state. So the earliest nation states were England and France, and the feudalism kind of broke apart because the Crusades opened up Europeans to other places. A lot of Europeans traveled down to the Holy Land to fight in the Crusades, and so they brought back a lot of culture and a lot of education, and really the Crusades and all of that travel helped kind of break up the feudal system. Peasants ended up buying their freedom and moving into towns, and towns grew, and then obviously the plague. The bubonic plague was a very deadly pandemic that killed 1/3 of the population in many countries of Europe. So that's like 33% of the population in many places of Europe were killed off. And so as a result of that, you needed to have a king or monarch unite large areas of land and create nation states. So we now are to the point where we've had the fall of Rome, we've had the feudal system, we've had the Crusades, and now England is formed as a nation state. So again, you will read in the cram about how England came about as a nation state. And we're going to talk about England for the rest of this year. They're a very significant country in world history. They obviously fought against the Americans in the Revolutionary War. England also was the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution. England fought in World War I and World War II, so understanding how England came about is pretty significant. And Alfred the Great was one of the kings of England that had a pretty significant job. His job was to try to stop the Vikings from invading England. The Vikings were Swedish and Norwegian and Danish sailors who oftentimes sailed through Europe, pillaging and stealing, and they were a pretty devastating force during medieval times, the Vikings. And King Alfred the Great figured out a way to stop the Viking invasions by building castles that were impenetrable. So again, Cram 5 will give you a short history of early England. Now, one of the most significant documents that took place in England was called the Magna Carta. Hopefully that's one of your vocabulary words. The Magna Carta was drawn up by English nobility. That's like big landowners and wealthy people. And it was approved by the king, and it guaranteed basic rights to the people. It guaranteed that the king would have to follow the same laws as everybody else, and it safeguarded their rights. So the Magna Carta was an important document in England that limited the powers of the king. Now, a king, especially the divine rights kings, they would love to have unlimited power. But this document helped reduce and check the unlimited powers of the king. So that's a really significant part of that cram. So, the Glorious Revolution. What exactly was that? It took place in England, and it was bloodless, meaning there wasn't a big war. Now, it's called a revolution because a revolution means a big change in something. So something did change in England, and you'll have to read the cram to figure out exactly what it was. But I'll give you just a little hint. England has always been a Protestant country. Okay?